I could never have predicted that I would choose to reveal my identity to the world just a few short months later. I didn't understand how or why, but for some unexplained reason, I knew I had to come forward and speak my truth. I tend to be an all-or-nothing type person. Recognizing that, I realized I could attempt to find purpose out of this horrible thing that happened to me, or I could let it consume me for everything I am. I couldn't let this be just something horrible that happened without purpose or explanation. I had to find meaning. Feeling hopeful and terrified, I decided to give up my anonymity in early 2017. I mustered the courage to tell my story unapologetically and have continued to do so from that point on. Since doing so, however, I've found I get the question, "How do you do it?" more often than I ever imagined. I don't tell you this out of pride or because it's something to be impressed by. Far from it. I tell you this out of embarrassment and with the wish that people only knew the real circumstances. People ask how I stay positive and focused as our story continues to evolve, but what those people don't realize is the sheer muscle it takes in order to face the world with a smile on. To stay focused on the tasks at hand on any given day, and to try and hold on to even a shred of the former me that my friends and family know and love. Those people see the fleeting good moments from an otherwise ugly reality that has been this past year of my life. They don't see the frustration, the exhaustion, the sadness, the emotional and physical trauma that haunts my every day and my every move. They don't see the days that my husband finds me crying on the floor of our bedroom. They don't see me hiding in the bathroom at work, begging myself to pull it together just to make it through the rest of the day. They don't see the trembling and shaking that my body has developed as a defense mechanism when I tell my story that can sometimes go on for hours at a time. They aren't the ones responding to text messages and Facebook messages from the other girls in this room talking about life at 3 in the morning like it's 3 in the afternoon. They don't see my Google search history morning, noon, and night, reading every word printed that day that may be even remotely relevant, as I hope for good news with every day that passes. They don't see the voice that lingers in the back of my head every time I go to the gym and my back yells at me in the ever-present pain that Larry neglected to heal. They don't see my fear of going to bed, not just because of the insomnia or nightmares that each night brings, but because I have no idea what waking up the next day will bring. They don't see the dramatic way this has changed my day-to-day life, the way it has forever changed the way I see the world, and now how I see my place in it. Those people see none of it. They see none of it because it is not their burden to bear. It is unfortunately ours. I look back at the beginning of this and who I was before. I had just gotten married, was doing well in my career, and was the happiest I had ever been. I look back at how carefree and light I felt, how easy life felt, and how excited I was about the future. I look at myself now in the during and can't help but feel sorry. I feel sorry for those around me that my spark is gone on any given day, and my personality is not the same as it used to be. I feel sorry that I'm exhausted all the time and want nothing to do with making plans or trying new things. I feel sorry for my coworkers that I'm constantly distracted and easily frustrated. I feel sorry for my friends that think they have to walk on eggshells around me just so they don't say the wrong thing. I feel sorry for my family who is inundated with news articles, constant case updates, and who has to tell me no more news tonight as I immerse myself on the couch, searching for an update and hoping for progress. And yet through all of this, it is the after that keeps me fighting. It is the promise that there is an after, the promise that there is a better tomorrow. It's the promise to little girls everywhere that I will never stop fighting for you. It's not in my nature to complain about how hard this has been. It's not natural for me to admit that this has been stronger than me at times and that I'm still regaining my strength with every morning that the sun rises. I don't want to stand here and say that this past year will forever have an asterisk next to it whenever I look back at the chapters of my story. I don't want to admit to anyone, myself in particular, that this man has affected me in a way that has forever changed me. Instead, I want to stand here and say that I'm going to be fine, that I'm going to be more than fine, that I'm going to be great. That I'm going to do amazing things and create a better future. That I'm going to be happy and carefree and living the life I want to lead. And then I pause for a moment and I realize that these things are a work in progress, and I have to say these things in the future tense as opposed to the present. I have to now set goals for the future to live my own life, to take back what's mine, to reclaim my me. I understand I have to say these things today as I look toward the future to protect myself and to protect others, and I do so willingly and with a sense of purpose like I never knew before. But that doesn't make it easier to swallow. Had MSU and USAG taken the reports of Larry's abuse seriously from any number of the women who came forward all those years ago, I would never have walked through his doors. I certainly wouldn't be standing here today. And hundreds of lives could have been spared from damage. It never had to get to this devastating point. I could be whole. I could be pain-free. I could be any number of things. But unfortunately, that's a chapter from a different book, a story never to be told. Instead, because of Larry, the very basics of a normal life are now an uphill battle staring us in the eye. We now have to use our voices and experiences to protect the little girls of tomorrow from watching their heroes turn into predators, and we have to put ourselves back together in the process. I look around this room and I am in complete awe. These women, these warriors, give me life. They lit a fire inside me that I didn't even know existed. And while I'm incredibly sorry for the circumstances that brought us together, I am nothing but grateful for how much they inspire me and fuel me to continue on in this fight against predators and their enablers. Putting names with faces and faces with stories, we are yet again reminded that Larry did not violate Jane Doe. He did not sexually assault Jane Doe with acupuncture needles in her spine time and time again. He violated real little girls and real women. Well, those little girls and women are here today, and we've said it before and we'll say it again, time's up. The truth will come out. The New York Times, in fact, recently released an ad speaking to these issues, a simple white background with black text. He said, she said. He said, she said. He said, she said, she said, she said, 1,000,000 times strong. And it goes on to say, the truth has power. The truth will not be threatened. The truth has a voice. And you know what I love about that ad, besides the obvious, of course? It's black and white. It's incredibly simple, yet incredibly powerful. And as complex as this case has become, the reality is it's really not that complicated at all. It's quite simple. It's quite black and white. You're either on the right side of the truth or you're not. There is no in between here. We've chosen our side, we've drawn our line in the sand, and we've made it clear that we choose the right side of the truth forever and ever, amen. We've made it clear that one sexual assault is one sexual assault too many. Michigan State, where do you stand? USAG and the USOC, where do you stand? We know where Larry stood, and look where we are today. People talk about how you wanted to leave a legacy, Larry. Change the world of sports medicine and leave your mark on USA gymnastics. Well, take a look around. I think it's safe to say you've succeeded in that endeavor. Before this experience, we were strangers passing on the street. But now, this past week, I've witnessed strangers hugging strangers. I've seen people comforting each other not because of familiarity of face, but because of familiarity of pain. I've seen people going out of their way to help each other simply because it's the right thing to do. You've changed the way we interact and the way we face each obstacle in front of us. You have successfully created an army of warrior women dedicated to changing the world. Unfortunately for you, though, the very thing you created spiraled out of your control. This army you have created, this army doesn't have a white flag to wave. We are here to show you, MSU, USAG, the USOC, the entire world. There is no white flag to wave when it comes to protecting little girls and their futures. We're 150 women strong and counting, and let me tell you, this army isn't going anywhere. People have often asked if I'm angry or what I need to find peace and closure. I can tell you this, I am not angry. I am not bitter. I do not wish you ill will. I don't need anything from you. I don't need an apology, and I don't need an explanation. What I need is accountability. What I need is the promise that no one else will ever have to endure the vast systemic failures that we endured. What I need is systemic change at the highest levels to end the culture of abuse that is sweeping our nation. I believe everything happens for a reason. We may not know and understand that reason right away, but I truly believe that one day it will reveal itself. As I've sat in the courtroom this week, listening to survivor after survivor come forward and tell her story, reclaim her strength, I now understand that my 25 years of existence has prepared me for this very moment. I look back at my childhood, and I now recognize that so many moments are a piece to this puzzle. As a young middle schooler, I volunteered with a nonprofit dedicating to helping women and children of domestic and sexual abuse. I went to boarding school as a freshman in high school, where I learned to confront my fears and navigate life as an independent adult. In high school, I learned to process tragedy through writing as I dealt with the loss of a friend to suicide. It was in high school that I worked to improve as a diver, only to get recruited to diving college, which was what eventually brought me back to Larry. In college, I was a member of the sorority Delta Gamma, whose symbol is the anchor, which signifies hope, and whose motto is do good. I graduated from a small but mighty liberal arts college in Ohio. Oddly enough, I graduated with a degree in communication and psychology. Now, if you want to talk about using your degree, let's just talk about these past 14 months. As you can imagine, pursuing my degree in communication and psychology meant taking several typical courses, but it also meant studying crucial life skills in a more uncommon manner that, unbeknownst to me, would all culminate into 1 year of my life. I took courses entitled Ethics, Society, and the Moral Self, Communicating Kindness, Psychology and Law, Listening, Thinking, Being, and perhaps the most interesting, Abnormal Psychology. Through these courses, I learned the difference between hearing and listening. We learned things like the 5 moral precepts of Buddhism, 3 of which include no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying. We learned the importance of listening to learn instead of listening to respond. We got a crash course in the legal system and how the psychological state of a defendant comes into play. We learned fascinating psychology behind personality disorders, substance abuse disorders, sexual disorders, you name it. We looked at case study after case study, identifying disorders, defining abnormalities, and learning the 4 Ds of abnormal psychology: deviance, dysfunction, distress, and danger. Little did I know it, but I was learning all about Larry and his sexually deviant ways. I was learning all about how MSU and USAG have chosen to handle this and enable a culture of abuse within their institutions. I wrote papers, I crammed for exams, I dedicated 4 years of my life preparing to face this very situation. I was becoming equipped to handle real life. I was gathering the knowledge and the skill set needed to take my education from beyond a textbook to living my life. My school taught me how to be an autonomous thinker, a discerning moral agent, and an active citizen of our democratic society. And that is how you prepare a student for the world. That is how you lead by example as an educational institution. That is how you care for the youth of America as an organization. You don't brush your problems under the rug and say that everything is fine. Everything is not fine. I don't know about you, but everything I'm looking at tells me it's time for the leadership at Michigan State to go back to school. I finished my time in school as the commencement speaker at my university's graduation, where I wrote a speech entirely about throwing your plan out the window and surrendering to the idea that there may just be a bigger plan at play. When you let go of the rigid plan and structure you think you're supposed to be following for your life, you might just end up exactly where you were meant to be. I truly believe, for some reason or another, that I was meant to be here today. You were meant to get caught. You were meant to be locked up for the rest of your life. MSU and USAG's culture of enabling predators is meant to end. As for us, we are meant to thrive. We are meant to be happy. We are meant to put an end to sexual abuse. And so here we are today, doing exactly that. We will not rest. Here we are, retelling the past, explaining our present, and working towards a better future. We stand here today amongst all of you, providing brief looks into our long process of healing and the systems that failed us, so that little girls tomorrow won't have to do the same. Our words today are simply the start. They are merely excerpts we've pulled from an otherwise multi-page story that is being added to every day. We will continue to write the pages of our story and the pages of history as we stand in solidarity against sexual abuse. Maybe one day we will understand the reason behind all of this. Maybe we won't. But I ask you, Your Honor, to listen to these brief excerpts and consider the full draft of this story when contemplating your sentence for Mr. Larry Nassar. I ask he receives the maximum sentence for his actions for reasons you are all too familiar with. This week, you have seen glimpses into the most vulnerable aspects of our lives, and you're hearing the abbreviated versions of our otherwise lengthy stories. But as everyone sitting here behind me knows, today is simply one more page of our story. We live the unabridged version every day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for those words. I know, and I can see it in you, that some days are hard to get out of bed, to speak, to work. But you've made it here every day, and you've overridden his story life, let me tell you, and you are better than any of those TV girls. You are real. And the thing about you is, you talk about fate and having to be here and go through this for a reason. It's interesting to me that your name is Sterling. You have a sterling voice of truth. You are a sterling tower of strength that will not be pulled down. And judges can't lie, so I'm not going to lie to you. There is already accountability, and there's going to be more. I know that, not because of me, but because of all of you and your voice. You are electrifying. You are great. I know how writing helps. One of the things I do, I also paint. You might want to try that. But I think that you and your sister survivors should get together and write your story so the whole world never forgets. The media will go away, but I bet there's little girls who want to hear your story, not the TV version. And you are such a good author. And look how strong you are. There are not very many people that can stand up in a court like this with all this around and do what you just did. You are healing. You are strong. You're a lightning rod along with your sister survivors. Keep shining. I see the shine back. You said, like others, that you You don't shine like you used to. You are shining now. He is not, and I assure you, he'll be in darkness the rest of his life. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you heal and leave all that junk here. I've said it before. We have good cleaning people. See how much they've already cleaned away? You are wonderful. Keep smiling and do great things in the world. You are bound and destined to do sterling things in the world.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. Counsel, could you approach for a moment? Next.
Your Honor, the next survivor you will hear from is one of our charged victims. She had previously been identified in court filings and documents as victim E. She has decided to become publicly identified. I think the day of the plea, actually, was the day that that began. I'm incredibly proud of her, and she is coming to the podium with her coach. Your Honor, this is Kaylee Lorenz.
Take your time. When you're ready, please state and spell your name for the record, and maybe you can move the microphone to just a little bit down. Thank you. That might be too far down. We'll see.
Oh, sorry.
Perfect. That looks good. We'll see. Please state and spell your name when you're ready.
Kaylee, Kayleelorinczz.
Thank you for being here. What would you like me to
Thank
know?
you. First, I want to thank Judge Aquilina for allowing me to speak today and how supportive you have been. Your Honor, do you mind if I address the defendant directly throughout my statement?
Please do.
Thank you. Larry, as I look at you today, I feel nauseous, even standing in front of you. Like the feeling as if I'm being assaulted by you all over again. You first saw me at 11 years old, and I can say that I was never so excited to see a doctor before. It didn't seem like I was going to see a doctor at all. It was more like the feeling of going to see a celebrity to help me get back into the sport that I love. Your reputation in the sport of gymnastics was like no other, and I can vividly remember the patient room that I was in for most of my appointments. Seeing all of the gymnastics posters of Olympians and cards from gymnasts on the walls of the room was just another reason why I thought you were so great. But at 13, my third appointment with you in August 2012, you stole my innocence from me. After your normal examination, you had asked me to change into an orange striped baggy pair of shorts, which you had never asked me to do before. Then you walked back into the room and asked me to lay on my stomach on the patient table. As you moved closer and closer to an area so private, so off limits, I began to feel more uncomfortable, confused and afraid both at the same time. All I could do was question in my head why you were doing this to me and hope that soon it would be over. 15 to 20 minutes went by when you stopped, and I thought to myself, it's finally over. But you weren't finished yet. You assaulted me again and again. I fought back tears, and I felt so dirty. From that point on, my life was forever changed. Immediately following that appointment, I no longer loved the sport of gymnastics, and I didn't even know why. Then I realized it didn't matter because you already told me to quit for an injury I never had. And you knew how much gymnastics meant to me. I was depressed, had nightmares, and I pushed people away, including my own parents. I was hospitalized twice for severe pain in my left eye, causing me to lose vision and numbness in my left arm. The doctors first thought that it was optic neuritis, but neither time could they find a medical reason for my pain. I felt like they thought I was making it up. To this day, I still suffer from this condition whenever I am under extreme stress. I now understand that that is just another consequence of your assaults. You referred me to physical therapy to someone who specialized in myofascial release, which is what you called your treatment. When the physical therapist performed myofascial release, however, I was so confused as to why her fingers were never inside of me. I asked my physical therapist at the end of the treatment, "That's myofascial release? That's not what Larry did to me." She looked at me completely confused, and that's when it really hit me that something wasn't right. For years, I held on to this information, not sure what to make out of it. It's like when you've been working on a puzzle and you have this one piece that just doesn't seem to fit anywhere. You keep trying to connect it to the other pieces that are already there, but no matter how hard you try, it just doesn't fit. Then in 2016, I was finally able to put the pieces of the puzzle together and realized that my worst fear was true. What I'd hoped was a legitimate medical procedure was in fact a sexual assault. At the pretrial hearing in May of 2017, I walked into the courtroom to confront you as my abuser, known as Victim E. I felt like the same scared little 13-year-old girl that you assaulted 5 years prior. Facing you made me sick to my stomach, and you sat there with absolutely no remorse. When I first started this process, I never wanted my identity to be shared, especially when testifying in court. As one of the defense attorneys began questioning me, she abruptly stopped to ask me if she looked familiar. When I answered no, she proceeded to tell me that I coached her daughters at the gym where I worked at and competed at for all of my gymnastics career, and even included the gym name. As soon as that information hit the news articles, anyone who knew me could figure out who Victim E was. How is that fair? I understand that defense attorneys have a job to do, and I respect that, but it's how you do your job that matters. So thank you for giving my identity away before I even wanted to. One of the hardest things that I have done throughout this process was to stand up in front of the MSU Board of Trustees, pleading with them to do the right thing. In an effort to get them to understand the monster that you are, I described in detail through sobs and tears what you did to me in that third appointment. What I forgot to share with them was that prior to the assault, you handed me a pin from the 2012 Olympics to ensure my silence, telling me how special I was and that I was one of the people you thought of when you got them. Not sure if you remember that. I haven't been able to look at that pin since. Your actions have kept me awake at night, crying uncontrollably and wanting to come home from school, my freshman year of college that I'm supposed to be enjoying. I'm afraid to go to sleep every night, afraid that I will have yet another nightmare. You have taken away my trust in others and for me to be able to form relationships with anybody. You took away the trust of my parents, which no child should ever question. None of this was ever their fault, but you led me to believe that because my parent was sitting in the room just feet away, and you still didn't mind violating that trust that we had in you. You made everyday conversation while you were assaulting me, as well as comments to me which I will never forget. How does this feel? And does this make you feel better, Kaylee? I only said yes, holding back my tears, pain, and disgust, in hopes that you would stop. So Larry, I ask you, how are you feeling right now? The audacity you had in doing this to a little girl, especially with her parents sitting in the room, is sickening. I can't even go to the doctor by myself or sit on a patient table without replaying my assault over and over in my head, afraid that another doctor will betray me just like you did. And still today, I question myself whether I know what's right and what's wrong, having a hard time being able to even trust myself. Ultimately, Larry, you made a critical mistake. You underestimated the mind, power, and will of your victims. These amazing, accomplished athletes. While we were mentally strong enough to endure your countless hours of abuse, strong enough to endure the pain of keeping your secret, strong enough to be pushed down and repressed by MSU, USAG, and the USOC, we were ultimately strong enough to take you down. Not one by one, but by an army of survivors. We are Jane Does no more. I will always love gymnastics, but I will never be able to look at the sport the same because of you. Now, as I look to the future, I plan to pursue a career in criminal justice. I'm hoping that by working to put monsters like you away, I might be able to stop the nightmares and start healing. There is peace in knowing that you will never be able to walk the streets again and hurt any other little girls. Judge Equilina, this monster deserves nothing but the absolute maximum sentence that this court can impose under this plea agreement. Larry, if you haven't listened to one thing I have said, you need to look at me and listen. I only hope that when you get a chance to speak, you tell us who knew what and when they knew it. Did Dean Strample know? Did Brooke Lemon know? How much did Kathy Klages know? Did Mark Hollis ever talk to you about your treatments? Did anyone on the Board of Trustees know? Did Luanna Simon know? And lastly, did John Getter know you were stealing the innocence of little girls in the back room of his gym? If you truly want us to heal, you will do this for us. Thank you.
Those were some big, strong words, and I hope you're not nauseous anymore because you just vomited all your words all over here. And you look like you feel better.
I do.
Good. Once in a while, it works when you vomit. You are a really strong sister survivor, and you're strong enough to talk in court. Your voice is strong. Your passion is there. I can tell you're healing, and your sister survivors are healing as well. And your voice of change has been echoed over and over and over again, and it's happening. And your voice is so strong, you're not just taking down this predator, but other predators, and allowing other men and women to talk about what's happened to them, because there are so many others who haven't come forward in other cases. Even in this one, we know that. The numbers tell us that. But you are going to do very, very well. You have a strong will. You have your power back. You have your light back. And what do you want to do in criminal justice?
I'm undecided about that, either in the courtroom or criminal investigator is.
Well, either one is great. Both will bring you into the courtroom, and
Yeah.
I'm hoping that if you practice, you get to practice in front of me.
I would love that.
So would I, and maybe I can swear you into the bar. That would be my
Thank
honor.
you.
So you let me know, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. You are a strong light. Keep shining.
Thank you so much.
actually, can I ask you one more question? And the words were just so powerful, I'm so sorry I forgot to ask. Are you asking for restitution?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I'm going to order that for you and for all the victims, survivors now. It's important, so I need you and your family to gather the bills and keep them coming. And the prosecutor will tell you how to do that, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Here we are on our final victim impact statement. I want to tell the court, when I met this woman about a year ago in my office in Detroit, I knew after meeting her that we would be here at some point. I didn't expect it would be a plea. I thought it might be a long, arduous trial. But after meeting her and listening to her and meeting her supportive husband, I knew there was no doubt that she would carry this case and that the world would hear her and believe her and that the truth would be exposed. I am so honored to let you know that the next person you will hear from is Rachel Denhollander.
Thank you so much for being here. Please state and spell your name for the record.
Rachel Denhollander, RACHAELDENHOLLANDER.
All right, you're a little soft-spoken. I know
Yes, ma'am.
you've got a tiger of a voice in there. So, when you're ready, I need you to speak and speak loudly with that tiger voice, all right?
That better?
You. Better. You don't have to lean over, just keep your voice up.
Okay, thank you.
That's better if you just speak up, okay? Thank you.
I do want to thank you first, Judge Aquilina, for giving all of us the chance to reclaim our voices. Our voices were taken from us for so long, and I am grateful beyond what I can express that you have given us the chance to restore them. There are two major purposes in our criminal justice system, Your Honor: the pursuit of justice and the protection of the innocent. Neither of these purposes can be met if anything less than the maximum available sentence under the plea agreement is imposed upon Larry for his crimes. Not because the federal sentence he will already serve is lacking, but because the sentence rendered today will send a message across this country, a message to every victim, and a message to every perpetrator. I realize you have many factors to consider when you fashion your sentence, but I submit to you that the preeminent question in this case, as you reach a decision about how best to satisfy the dual aims of this court, is the same question that I asked Judge Neff to consider. How much is a little girl worth? How much is a young woman worth? Larry is a hardened and determined sexual predator. I know this firsthand. At age 15, when I suffered from chronic back pain, Larry sexually assaulted me repeatedly under the guise of medical treatment for nearly a year. He did this with my own mother in the room, carefully and perfectly obstructing her view so that she would not know what he was doing. His ability to gain my trust and the trust of my parents, his grooming and carefully calculated, brazen sexual assault was the result of deliberate, premeditated, intentional, and methodological patterns of abuse, patterns that were rehearsed long before I walked through Larry's exam room door, and which continued to be perpetrated, I believe, on a daily basis for 16 more years until I filed the police report. Larry is the most dangerous type of abuser, one who is capable of manipulating his victims through coldly calculated grooming methodologies, presenting the most wholesome and caring external persona as a deliberate means to ensure a steady stream of young children to assault. And while Larry is unlikely to live past his federal sentence, he is not the only predator out there. And this sentence will send a message about how seriously abuse will be taken. So I ask, how much is a little girl worth? How much priority should be placed on communicating that the fullest weight of the law will be used to protect another innocent child from the soul-shattering devastation that sexual assault brings? I submit to you that these children are worth everything, worth every protection the law can offer, worth the maximum sentence. The second aim of this court and our criminal justice system is to pursue justice for the victims that have already been harmed. And this aim, too, can only be realized by imposing the maximum sentence under the plea agreement. And in reaching this decision, too, we also must answer the question, how much was the little girl worth? How much were these young women worth? This time, however, the little girls in question are not potential victims. They are real women and children, real women and little girls who have names and faces and souls, real women and children whose abuse and suffering was enjoyed for sexual fulfillment by the defendant. I believe sometimes, Your Honor, that when we are embroiled in a legal dispute, the words of our legal system, designed to categorize and classify and instruct, can inadvertently sterilize the harsh realities of what has taken place. They can serve as a shield against the horror of what we are really discussing. And this must not ever happen, because if the truth about what Larry has done must be realized to its fullest depth if justice is to ever be served. And so for a moment, Your Honor, I, like every woman who has come before you, want to take a moment to drop that shield. Larry meticulously groomed me for the purpose of exploiting me for his sexual gain. He penetrated me, he groped me, he fondled me, and then he whispered questions about how it felt. He engaged in degrading and humiliating sex acts without my consent or permission. And Larry enjoyed it. Larry sought out and took pleasure in little girls and women being sexually injured and violated because he liked it. And as I and so many other women and little girls were being violated, Larry found sexual satisfaction in our suffering. As we were being sexually violated, even as very young children, as young as 6 years old, Larry was sexually aroused by our humiliation and our pain. He asked us how it felt because he wanted to know. What was done to myself and these other women and little girls, and the fact that our sexual violation was enjoyed by Larry, matters. It demands justice. And the sentence you impose today will send a message about how much these precious women and children are worth. You have seen our pictures, Your Honor. Moments in time captured when they were young and vulnerable and violated. I think of the young girl that I was, and the little girls and young women all of these survivors were every day. I feel like I see them in the faces of my two precious daughters. When I watch my daughters' eyes light up as they dance to the Nutcracker, I remember the little girl that I and all of these women used to be. The sparkle their eyes must have had, as mine did, before their innocence was taken. I watch my daughters love and trust unreservedly, and I remember the long road that it has been to let myself love and be loved without fear. I think of the scars that still remain for all of us. One of the worst parts of this entire process was knowing, as I began to realize what had happened to me, how many other little girls had been left destroyed too. I was barely 15 when Larry began to abuse me, and as I lay on the table each time and tried to reconcile what was happening with the man Larry was held out to be, there were three things I was very sure of. First, it was clear to me this was something Larry did regularly. Second, because this was something Larry did regularly, it was impossible that at least some women and girls had not described what was going on to officials at MSU and USAG. I was confident of this. And third, I was confident that because people at MSU and USAG had to be aware of what Larry was doing and had not stopped him, there could surely be no question about the legitimacy of his treatment. This must be medical treatment. The problem must be me. And because I had friends who were physical therapists who actually practiced legitimate internal pelvic floor techniques, I also knew at 15 that to practice this, you must have specialized training and certification. Surely anyone who had heard that Larry was penetrating little girls would have demanded to know where he got his training. And if there was any question, he would have never been allowed near me. And so I lay still. And on the first 2 points, I was right. It was something he did often. And others had described Larry's treatment before. In fact, though I didn't know it at the time, 4 girls and women had described in detail to 3 different athletic departments at MSU what he was doing and his penetration, and their belief that they had been sexually assaulted. It was reported to Kathy Kalages, MSU's head gymnastics coach, to a track coach, and to multiple athletic trainers and supervisors years before I walked into Larry's door. But I was wrong in my 3rd belief. I was wrong that surely if someone had been made aware of what Larry was doing, they would report it and ensure it was legitimate before ever allowing him near another child. I did not know when I was 15 that in 1997, 3 years before I walked into Larry's exam room, that MSU's head gymnastics coach, Kathy Kalages, had waived a report form in front of Larissa Boyce after being told by 2 separate gymnasts of what Larry was doing, and told Larissa there would be consequences for her if she reported. I did not know that Tiffany Thomas Lopez had reported the penetration and sexual assault to athletic trainer Destiny Teachner-Hawk and to other athletic trainers and supervisors 2 years before I walked into Larry's door. I did not know that Christy Achenbach had reported the penetration and sexual assault to her track coach and her athletic trainers and had also been silenced a full year before I walked into Larry's door. I did not know that Jennifer Bedford had also reported to Destiny Teachner-Hawk and asked if she could file a report that Larry's treatment made her feel uncomfortable, and that she had also been silenced. At 15, I believed that the adults at MSU surrounding Larry would do the right thing if they were aware of what Larry was doing, and I was terribly wrong. And discovering that I could not only trust my abuser, but I could not trust the people surrounding him has been devastating. It is part of the consequences of sexual assault, and it needs to be taken seriously. I did not know that at the same time Larry was penetrating me, USAG was systematically burying reports of sexual assault against member coaches in a file cabinet instead of reporting them, creating a culture where predators like Larry and so many others in the organization, up to the highest level coaches, were able to sexually abuse children, including our Olympians, without any fear of being caught. I did not know that, contrary to my belief, the elite gymnasts whose pictures were plastered on Larry's wall were far from protected. That USAG, rather than supervising Larry, was allowing him to treat these girls in their own beds without even having a medical license in Texas. I did not know any of these things. And so as Larry was abusing me each time, I assured myself it must be fine, because I thought I could trust the adults around me. My misplaced trust in my physician and my misplaced trust in the adults around me were wielded like a weapon, and it cost me dearly, and it follows me everywhere. And I would like to take a moment now to address both organizations whose failures led to my sexual assault, because it is part of the consequences that I now carry.
You may.
Thank you. MSU, we have been telling our stories for more than 18 months, and you have yet to answer a single question I have asked. Every time I repeat these facts about the number of women who reported to employees at MSU and were silenced, you respond the exact same way. You issue a press statement saying there was no cover-up because no one who heard the reports of assault believed that Larry was committing abuse. You play word games, saying you didn't know because no one believed. I know that. And the reason everyone who heard about Larry's abuse did not believe it is because they did not listen. They did not listen in 1997 or 1998 or 1999 or 2000 or 2004 or 2014. No one knew, according to your definition of know, because no one handled the reports of abuse properly. Victims were silenced, intimidated, repeatedly told it was medical treatment, and even forced to go back for continued sexual assault. You have stated in the motion to dismiss our civil suit that ironically is being heard right now in court as I am speaking, that the reports that were given in 1997, 98, 99, and 2000 to track coages, head gymnastics coaches, and athletic trainers and supervisors don't, quote, count as notice because these teenagers didn't report it to the right official. The 14-year-old didn't go to the right person. You have stated that no reports of sexual assault count as notice unless it is reported to a person who is capable of firing the alleged perpetrator. This entirely contradicts the letter that President Simon sent to all 11,000 MSU employees in 2012, reminding them that MSU policy requires them to report any suspected child abuse and any allegations of sexual assault against someone at MSU. So MSU, which is it? Do your employees have a duty to protect children or not? It has been 18 months, and I am still asking the same questions, hoping that the little girls that come after me will have adults that they can trust. And I have been getting the same answer for a year. And so I am asking point blank again. When Kathy Collages humiliated Larissa Boyce and the second gymnast, greatly compounding the trauma of their sexual assault, and waved the report form in front of her, telling her there would be consequences if she reported, is this the right way or the wrong way to handle sexual assault allegations on MSU's campus? When Tiffany Thomas Lopez reported her abuse to athletic trainers and supervisors, and the trainers used the emotional pain Tiffany was in after her father's death to convince her it would be too exhausting and painful to bother filing a report, was it the right way or the wrong way to handle a report of sexual assault on MSU's campus? When Christy Achenbach reported the sexual assault to her track coach and athletic trainers and was also silenced, was it the right way or the wrong way to handle a report of sexual assault on MSU's campus? When Kyle Stevens' parents reported Larry's sexual abuse of their daughter to an MSU psychiatrist, and he brought Larry in to talk to her parents instead of reporting as he was mandated to do by law, was it the right way or the wrong way to handle a report of sexual assault on MSU's campus? When Amanda Thomashaw reported to the Title IX office, and Larry was allowed to hand-pick the 4 colleagues to be interviewed to determine whether his treatment was legitimate, was that the right way or the wrong way to investigate a claim of sexual assault on MSU's campus? And after all this, when I came forward in 2016, I brought an entire file of evidence with me. I made a police report and a Title IX report, and I brought with me to those reports my medical records showing that Larry had never charted penetrative techniques. I brought medical records from a nurse practitioner documenting my graphic disclosure of abuse to her way back in 2004. I had my journals showing the mental anguish I had been in since the assault. A catalog of national and international medical journal articles showing what real pelvic floor treatment looks like. I brought a letter from a neighboring district attorney vouching for my character and truthfulness and urging detectives to take my case seriously. I brought a cover letter going point by point through Michigan law and case law, explaining how every element of first-degree criminal sexual assault was met and could be proven. I brought a witness I had disclosed to in 2004. I brought evidence of 2 more women unconnected to me who were also claiming sexual assault. And I had the names of 3 pelvic floor experts willing to speak on my behalf. And the MSU PD handled it beautifully. But MSU officials were a different story. Because the response of Dean William Strample was to send an email to Larry that day and tell him, quote, "Good luck, I am on your side." And when my video testimony to the Indy Star came out, graphically describing the abuse that Larry perpetrated, disclosing horrific details to the world that no one was ever supposed to know, that I had never told anyone, even my own husband, until that point, Dean Strample forwarded that video testimony to the MSU provost, and he mocked it. He called it the cherry on the cake of his day. President Simon and Board of Trustees, is this the right way to handle disclosures of abuse on MSU's campus? When Brooke Lemon, one of the doctors Larry was allowed to handpick to clear himself in 2014, was interviewed for my investigation, she said I hadn't really been penetrated. I only thought I had because, quote, "When I am a 15-year-old girl, I think everything between my legs is my vagina." I only thought Larry had put his fingers in me for up to 40 minutes at a time for a full year. I was just confused. Sounds eerily familiar to what Amanda Thomashaw was told in 2014, that she, quote, "didn't understand the nuanced differences between sexual assault and a medical exam." It sounds eerily familiar to what every single woman was told, all the way back to 1997. We were all wrong. We were all just confused. Board of Trustees, is this the right way to handle disclosures of sexual assault on MSU's campus? And if that were not bad enough, when I finally joined the civil suit 5 months later, after waiting for almost half a year for MSU to do the right thing, the vice president of the Board of Trustees, Joel Ferguson, went on television and gave a press interview in which he claimed those of us who had filed civil suit were ambulance chasers who were looking for a payday. In fact, I know that at least one other high-ranking MSU official has specifically called me out by name and said I am in it for the money. This has never been contradicted, retracted, or refuted. And MSU, you need to realize that you are greatly compounding the damage done to these abuse victims by the way you are responding. This, what it took to get here, what we had to go through for our voices to be heard because of the responses of the adults in authority, has greatly compounded the damage we suffer, and it matters. We have waited 18 months to be told no, this is not how we handle this on MSU's campus. But instead, everyone has doubled down on the claim that nothing was done wrong. And the only conclusion that can be reached is that no one truly sees anything wrong with any of this. And that is terrifying. And it leaves me terrified for the little girls of the future, who we are here to protect. And because of this willful ignorance, victim silencing, and mishandling of sexual assault reports against Larry in 97, 98, and 99, I walked through Larry's door in 2000 and never walked out the same. Not long after I stopped seeing Larry, I transitioned from athlete to coach. And every day that I nurtured those baby gymnasts, I wondered if any of them would find their way into his exam room. When one of my little girls was finally referred to him, I took a chance and I spoke up. And I was kindly cautioned for my own sake to remain silent. My little baby gymnast was sent to Larry before I even knew a decision had been made to do so. Her family moved away almost immediately thereafter, and I wept for that little girl, and I prayed to God that she was under the age range that Larry preferred. She was 7. But when I filed my police report, Kyle Stevens came forward, and she was 6, a year younger than my little girl. And I cried in my kitchen, and I don't know yet if that little girl walked out the same that she walked in. I transitioned from coaching to working in public policy, and I fought fear every time I had to commute or work in close quarters with my male colleagues. I dreaded working on current events or legislation that involved sexual assault because I knew the memories that would come with it. I still watched gymnastics, but I looked away whenever the camera panned to the sidelines in case Larry would be there. I wondered almost daily if there was any chance that my voice would ever be heard. I began law school when I was 19, and I wrapped up in blankets every time I studied torts or crimes related to sexual assault, and I hoped my face wouldn't betray me in classroom discussions. And I researched internal pelvic floor procedures, and I tried to find out what had happened to me, and I watched for any sign that I would ever be believed. I met my future husband, and I told him what I never wanted to tell anyone, and I wondered if he would walk away, and he didn't. But I couldn't even hold his hand or look up at him because closeness wasn't safe, and trust wasn't safe. We got married, and my 25th birthday came and went, and I sat up for nights before, believing my ability to file a police report would end on that birthday. I didn't know the statute of limitations had been lifted. I woke up the morning I turned 25, and instead of being able to feel joy at a milestone, I felt only hopelessness and grief, because I thought my chance to stop this man was over. I thought daily about all the little women and girls walking into his office, and I wondered if it would ever, ever end. I became a mother 3 times over, and the fear that hung over each birth, knowing I would be vulnerable in a medical setting, cast a horrific shadow over what should have been an occasion of pure joy. And I watched for a chance to be believed, and I waited. I held my firstborn, and then my 2 daughters, and each time I did, Larry, I remembered the day you brought Caroline into your office so that I could hold her. You knew how much I loved children, and you used your own daughter to manipulate me. And every time I held my babies, I prayed to God you would leave your abuse in the exam room and not take it home to the little girl born with black hair just like her daddy. And then the Indy Star story came out about the rampant cover-up of sexual abuse at USAG, and I knew this was the chance. And I wrote them immediately. But because of what Larry did, the cost to making it end has been incredibly high. And the effects of Larry's abuse has been redoubled in the effort that it took to stop him. Choosing to live those moments over and over, daily releasing every shred of privacy I had, living with the reality that I not only didn't get to choose what you did, but now I didn't get to choose who knew about it. Even my status as a sexual assault victim has impacted, or did impact, my ability to advocate for sexual assault victims, because once it became known that I too had experienced sexual assault, people close to me used it as an excuse to brush off my concerns when I advocated for others who had been abused, saying I was just obsessed because of what I had gone through, that I was imposing my own experience upon other institutions who had massive failures, and much worse. My advocacy for sexual assault victims, something I cherished, cost me my church and our closest friends 3 weeks before I filed my police report. I was left alone and isolated. And far worse, it was impacted because when I came out, my sexual assault was wielded like a weapon against me, often by those who should have been the first to support and help. And I couldn't even do what I loved best, which was to reach out to others. I was subjected to lies and attacks on my character, including very publicly by attorney Shannon Smith when I testified under oath. I was being attacked for wanting fame and attention, for making up a story to try to get money. And, Your Honor, since these attacks were made on my character very publicly, on public record, I would like to take an opportunity briefly now to correct them.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Out of the 2 women in question that day, Ms. Smith and I, who were attempting to communicate through either questions or answers, I would like to note that only one of us was taking pictures of the courtroom on her cell phone. Only one of us posed for the press and said, quote, "I feel like I should say cheese." And out of the 2 of us, only one of us was making money off her court appearance that day. I don't feel the need to say anything else. I think I've communicated clearly.
Your Honor, I'm sorry again, I have to object with the commentary directed towards the bench. I'm sorry.
First of all, we need everybody to calm down. Counsel, I've heard you. She's not going to say anything else. This is her time to speak. You are going to get your opportunity, and you can counter what you need to. We're going to sit down, and you may proceed, ma'am.
Thank you. The cost, emotional and physical, to see this through has been greater than many will ever know. And Larry, I don't need to tell you what the cost of your abuse has been to me because you got to read my journals, every word of them, because those had to go into evidence to make this happen. But I want you to understand why I made this choice, knowing full well what it was going to cost to get here, and with very little hope of ever succeeding. I did it because it was right. No matter the cost, it was right. And the farthest I can run from what you have become is to daily choose what is right instead of what I want. You have become a man ruled by selfish and perverted desires, a man defined by his daily choices over and over again to feed that selfishness and perversion. You chose to pursue your wickedness no matter what it cost others. And the opposite of what you have done is for me to choose to love sacrificially, no matter what it costs me. In our early hearings, you brought your Bible into the courtroom, and you have spoken of praying for forgiveness, and so it is on that basis that I appeal to you. If you have read the Bible you carry, you know that the definition of sacrificial love portrayed is of God himself, loving so sacrificially that he gave up everything to pay a penalty for the sin he did not commit. By his grace, I too choose to love this way. You spoke of praying for forgiveness, but Larry, if you have read the Bible you carry, you know forgiveness does not come from doing good things. as if good deeds can erase what you have done. It comes from repentance, which requires facing and acknowledging the truth about what you have done in all of its utter depravity and horror, without mitigation, without excuse, without acting as if good deeds can erase what you have seen in this courtroom today. The Bible you carry says it is better for a millstone to be thrown around your neck and you thrown into a lake than for you to make even one child stumble. And you have damaged hundreds. The Bible you speak carries a final judgment where all of God's wrath and its eternal terror is poured out on men like you. Should you ever reach the point of truly facing what you have done, the guilt will be crushing. And that is what makes the gospel of Christ so sweet, because it extends grace and hope and mercy where none should be found. And it will be there for you. I pray you experience the soul-crushing weight of guilt so that you may someday experience true repentance and true forgiveness from God, which you need far more than forgiveness from me, though I extend that to you as well. Throughout this process, I have clung to a quote by C.S. Lewis where he says, "My argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of unjust and just? A man does not call a line crooked unless he first has some idea of straight. What was I comparing the universe to when I called it unjust? Larry, I can call what you did evil and wicked because it was. And I know it was evil and wicked because the straight line exists. The straight line is not measured based on your perception or anyone else's perception. And this means I can speak the truth about my abuse without minimization or mitigation, and I can call it evil because I know what goodness is. And this is why I pity you. Because when a person loses the ability to define good and evil, when they cannot define evil, they can no longer define and enjoy what is truly good. When a person can harm another human being, especially a child, without true guilt, they have lost the ability to truly love. Larry, you have shut yourself off from every truly beautiful and good thing in this world that could have and should have brought you joy and fulfillment. And I pity you for it. You could have had everything you pretended to be. Every woman who stood up here truly loved you as an innocent child. Real, genuine love for you. And it did not satisfy. I have experienced the soul-satisfying joy of a marriage built on sacrificial love and safety and tenderness and care. I have experienced true intimacy in its deepest joys, and it is beautiful and sacred and glorious. And that is a joy you have cut yourself off from ever experiencing. And I pity you for it. I have been there for young gymnasts and helped them transform from awkward little girls to graceful, beautiful, confident athletes, and taken joy in their success because I wanted what was best for them. And this is a joy you have cut yourself off from forever because your desire to help was nothing more than a facade for your desire to harm. I have lived the deep satisfaction of wrapping my small children up in my arms and making them feel safe and secure because I was safe. And this is a rich joy beyond what I can express. And you have cut yourself off from it because you were not safe. And I pity you for that. In losing the ability to call evil what it is, without mitigation, without minimization, you have lost the ability to define and enjoy love and goodness. You have fashioned for yourself a prison that is far, far worse than any I could ever put you in. And I pity you for that. And this is also why, in many ways, Your Honor, the worst part of this process was each name, each number who came forward to the police. With each Jane Doe, I saw my little girls, and the little girls that were. The little girls who walked into Larry's office that I could not save because no one wanted to listen. And while that is not my guilt, It is pain I still carry, and pain I share with them. I cried for them, and with every tear that fell, I wondered who is going to find these little girls? Who is going to tell them how much they are worth, how valuable they are, how deserving of justice and protection? Who is going to tell these little girls that what was done to them matters, that they are seen and valued, that they are not alone and they are not unprotected? And I could not do that. But we are here now, and today that message can be sent. With the sentence you hand down, you can communicate to all these little girls and to every predator, to every little girl or young woman who is watching, how much a little girl is worth. I am asking that when we leave this courtroom, we leave knowing that when Larry was sexually aroused and gratified by our violation, when he enjoyed our suffering, when he took pleasure in our abuse, that it was evil and wrong. I ask that you hand down a sentence that tells us that what was done to us matters, that we know we are worth everything, worth the greatest protection the law can offer, the greatest measure of justice available. And to everyone who is watching, I ask that same question. How much is a little girl worth? Larry said in court that he hoped education and learning would happen from this tragedy, and I share that hope. And this is what we need to learn. Look around the courtroom. Remember what you have witnessed these past 7 days. This is what it looks like when someone chooses to put their selfish desires above the safety and love for those around them. And let it be a warning to us all. And moving forward as a society, this is what it looks like when the adults in authority do not respond properly to disclosures of sexual assault. This is what it looks like when institutions create a culture where a predator can flourish unafraid and unabated. And this is what it looks like when people in authority refuse to listen, put friendships in front of the truth, fail to create or enforce proper policy, and fail to hold enablers accountable. This is what it looks like. It looks like a courtroom full of survivors who carry deep wounds. Women and girls who have banded together to fight for themselves because no one else would do it. Women and girls who carry scars that will never fully heal, but who have made the choice to place the guilt and shame on the only person to whom it belongs, the abuser. But may the horror expressed in this courtroom over the last 7 days be motivation for anyone and everyone, no matter the context, to take responsibility if they have erred in protecting a child, to understand the incredible failures that led to this week, and to do it better the next time. Judge Aquilina, I plead with you as you deliberate the sentence to give Larry, send a message that these victims are worth everything. In order to meet both the goals of this court, I plead with you to impose the maximum sentence under the plea agreement, because everything is what these survivors are worth. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you asking for restitution?
No, ma'am.
I'm going to leave it open anyway. You might find that if it's available, if you don't need the money, you have another pocket to fill. Someone else, a sister survivor, might be able to use it. I don't know, but it is your money and it is your right. So I will leave it open. You don't have to use it. I want you to know that your words are the right words. You didn't just build a file. You built an army of survivors, and you are a 5-star general. Your demands for accountability and change are happening. Your words, your army, tells the world that these girls, all of you and all of the others who you've mentioned, who I've mentioned, who I think every survivor has mentioned the concern for all of those other ones who haven't been able to speak out or who will in the future be abused, that they are worth something, that they have a voice. You're a shining example. Your words have grace and great hope for a better future. in the world for all women, for all children, for all survivors. And this is, as you know, sadly, not just limited to women or children, female, also male. You're in control now, and I think you also know that sexual assault is about control. I don't even know if he knew what he was enjoying, because it was about controlling all of you. And none of you are being controlled anymore. You found your voice, and you found a world of support. He will lose his voice, his freedom, his ability to move. How much is a little girl worth? It's sad that if I answered that question, I'd have to violate the law, and I won't.
I appreciate that.
I think you all in the Me Too movement need to put lines above that. I have a name. I have a voice. I matter. And why? Because all of you have come forward as sister survivors. But why more than that? Because you started the tidal wave. You made all of this happen. You made all of these voices matter. You're sister survivors, and I thank you. You are the bravest person I have ever had in my courtroom.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next part of this process, I think I counted 168 voices that I've heard from. I know your number is a little bit less. What's your number?
I have 156 survivors that you've heard from.
Okay. And does this now conclude everyone?
This concludes, yes, live and read on behalf of victim impact statements, yes.
Okay, how we will proceed next is we have to make a correction on the number of jail days in the pre-sentence investigation report. The people have their opportunity to speak, then defense counsel, then defendant if he chooses, and then I will speak and sentence. Before all of that happens, we are going to take 15 minutes, unless you'd like to speak now, but I think it's better after the break.
I would like to break, thank you.
I thought so. Thank you.
All right.
At this time, we're back on the record. At this time, council, we need to update the pre-sentence investigation report. I spoke with you in chambers and I made the following changes. I don't think there's an objection to it, but on the cover page of the pre-sentence investigation report, I changed counts 1, 2, 5, 8, 10, and 18 to 369 days credit, and count 24 to 370 days credit. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I've also changed that on the second page, and I've also changed those days in the basic information sheet. I don't know, you know what, I didn't look at the evaluation and plan, but if it's in there, I will change that as well. Oh, yes, it is. So under the recommendation, on page 3, I'm changing the 361 to 369, and the 362 days to 370. Are there any other corrections, additions, deletions at this time?
Not on behalf of the people.
Not on behalf of defense counsel, Your Honor, but I do have a little housekeeping matter. The last individual that, do I need to come up there?
Probably, yes.
Okay. The last individual that spoke referenced my client's daughter by name. I'm just going to ask that the court seal that page of the transcript. I spoke with the Attorney General's office about that, and I don't think that they have a problem with doing so.
Okay, again, as to any of these little blips we've had, not a surprise over so many pages of testimony in 7 days. I don't think there's a rule to strike it officially from it, the transcript, but we will seal that page or that word, or maybe we can talk to Ms. Hamlin about putting that name or the full name in the other situations, or that single name on one single sheet so nothing else is lost from the transcript. I don't know. There might be ways to do it to get around the rules. We'll figure that out so we maintain the structure of the transcript without violating any rules and protect those we need to. Is that acceptable?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. At this time, then, on behalf of the people, what would you like me to know?
Your Honor, before I begin, I do want to put on the record that obviously you've heard from 156 victims, or we have read their statement. You have been presented in the 4-inch binder in front of you with at least, I believe by our count, about 24 additional victim impact statements from survivors who wish to submit those directly to the court. I know you've reviewed those, and I just wanted to place that on the record as well.
Thank you. I do have them. My law clerk has diligently placed them in this binder. They're in some kind of order. And I also will be adding to that for my vertical, my own notes of what I've highlighted. And of course, Ms. Hamlin has the record.
Thank you. Your Honor, on behalf of the Michigan Department of Attorney General, the investigation and prosecution team, I do have some things I would like to say.
You may proceed.
Thank you. The breadth and ripple of this defendant's abuse and destruction is nearly infinite. It centers in the Lansing and Michigan State University communities. It spans the state of Michigan and reaches club and elite training gyms, collegiate athletics, and even the United States and international Olympic communities. And it's not even limited to gymnastics, as athletes from over a dozen different sports have reported abuse. His practiced and perfected abuse spanned over 25 years and included countless victims, beginning before he was even a doctor, one who traveled the world seeking gold. But we know his access to children and young women and his abuse did not end until an investigative news report and one brave woman came public to stop him. The basic facts of his assaults have been recounted by the charged victims in this case, as well as numerous victims who gave their impact statements. The facts that the defendant admitted to Your Honor under oath. that he penetrated these young girls' vaginas and anuses with his bare hands, not for any medical purpose, but for his own sexual pleasure. He had erections as he performed these so-called treatments. He asked 11-year-olds to tell him if they were on their periods so he could be sure that they were ripe for his abuse. Children that were prepubescent, often unaware of their bodies. Children whose parents sat feet away. Mere children. But the assaults he perpetrated on these trusting young girls was not limited to the hours and hours and hours of sexual penetration. The defendant is a twisted, beloved, renowned doctor who used his prestige to gain trust of these girls, to exploit them, leaving many of them emotionally shattered, used by a man that they not only trusted, but also loved. He supposedly practiced osteopathic manipulative medicine, but in truth, he was simply a master manipulator. He manipulated victims and parents. He manipulated his community through the press and social media early in this case. He tried to manipulate the police department in his interviews. He tried to manipulate prior investigators. He even tried to manipulate Your Honor and this court through his pathetic letter, all while knowing the truth, that he did the things he was accused of doing. And in competitive gymnastics, he found the perfect place for this master manipulation. In gymnastics, young girls do what they're told. They hide their pain, they hide their injuries. These young girls bared all of it. Their bodies were constantly on display and under scrutiny. It takes some kind of sick perversion to not only assault a child, but to do so with her parent in the room. To do so while a lineup of eager young gymnasts waited at Twist Stars to see the gymnastics god, Larry Nassar. It's a sick perversion when a defendant's close family friends were upstairs in his own home while he abused young Kyle Stevens, just 6 years old when it began. His own wife and children sat upstairs for years while he gave his basement treatments. To unnecessarily and without warning penetrate an unsuspecting minor for your own selfish sexual gains while her parent sat just feet away, unknowing, had to be part of the rush or the thrill for this defendant. The thrill that he might just get caught. But he was a master. He had developed a built-in defense. No coach should be in a shower with a boy. No priest has an excuse for any type of sexual touching. But Nassar perfected a built-in excuse in defense. He was a doctor, and a good one, so the world thought. And this makes up the other half of his scheme. The trust he could garner from being not only a doctor, a respected professional, but an Olympic doctor, one who treated these young girls, these young victims, heroes. He adorned his office with pictures of Olympians he treated, with the far-off places his supposed expertise took him. He brought back tokens for his precious victims, regalia from competitions around the world. And in doing so, he made each of his victims feel special. As Cassie Powell said, the defendant hid behind Olympic rings in Spartan green and white. For many of these girls, Nassar was not just a doctor, but a confidant, a role model, sometimes the only affirming male influence in their lives. The level of Nassar's predation reaches even higher because he often knew the victims' parents, some of whom were fellow doctors, others who unwittingly sent patients to him. He even knew that some of the parents were police officers. He was so well practiced in his abuse and continually empowering himself that he believed he'd get away with it despite any parent's profession. He believed he was untouchable. This defendant not only robbed these children of their innocence, he robbed many of them of their good health. He performed no healing, only hurt, with so many heartbreaking stories of unnecessary treatments, misdiagnoses, inaccurate medical treatment, which we know has resulted in lasting, permanent damage. Many of these survivors wonder whether their now lifelong injuries could have been treated had he not wanted the continued access to their young bodies. He wasn't a world-renowned doctor. As one of our experts so eloquently put it in preparing this case for trial, he was performing hocus-pocus medicine. Over the last 16 months, as I have prepared this case and lived this case and thrown my heart and soul into this case, I have often wondered, did he really think he was going to get away with this? Abusing so many for so many years, over 2 decades, so many sports, no patient, no child was safe, and yet he also abused some of our most prominent national heroes. Maybe he did think he could beat the odds. And you know what? For years, he did. What that did, that beating of the odds, to Kyle Stevens, to Jessica Tomashow, to Madeline Jones, to Kaylee Lorenz, to Bailey Lawrenson, to victims D and G and I, to Rachel Denhollander. History gave him guidance for the future. Every previous time there had been an allegation, nothing happened. His lies worked. This court heard from several women, some decades later, who were initially determined to be confused or to be liars. He was believed over these children: Larissa Boyce, Tiffany Thomas, Breanne Randall, Amanda Tomashow. Sometimes 4, 14, and 20 years have passed since those brave women told someone. You saw and heard firsthand. To know your truth, to be called a liar by not only your abuser, but to also not be believed by other trusting adults, what does that do to a person? Adults who were supposed to protect you and could have made it stop and could have prevented others from the same fate. What does that do to a child? We saw firsthand what it does. And with each time he got away, he was empowered to continue and perfect and abuse even more. It should not take finding a collection of 37,000 vile and disgusting images to believe these women and girls. It shouldn't take investigative journalists to expose predators. It should not take one brave woman put in the unenviable position and choice to go public with her name and be the only public person for months. But thank God we have these journalists, and that they expose this truth, and that they continue to cover this story. Thank God Rachel Denhollander made that first contact with the reporter and decided to allow them to publish her name. How many times have we heard that without those stories and Rachel, victims would not have reported, they would not be here to speak this week to expose what truly happened all these years behind those doors and under that towel. We have all learned a few lessons from this case and these past 7 days of powerful testimony. As I reflect back an entire semester of a college class in sexual abuse, grooming behaviors, why victims delay, and predatory behavior has played out these past week and a half. But as we look back on this case in the last 7 days, I'm struck by a number of observations. What does it say about our society that victims of sexual abuse have to hide their pain for years when they did nothing wrong? What does it say about our society when victims do come forward and they are automatically met with skepticism and doubt, treated as liars until proven true? What do we take away from this? These have been important narratives to hear and witness and listen to. They will be the words that burn down cultural stereotypes and cultural myths. And I have a few takeaways and lessons I hope anyone watching these past 7 days has learned and will take away with them. The first is that we must start by believing. Other adults must start by believing when children and young people report abuse, regardless of who the perpetrator is, no matter his education, his position, the respect he commands, or the awards and adorations he has received. Research shows that false allegations are slim, that most perpetrators are serial offenders, and that how a victim, especially a child, is treated when they disclose, if they are believed and supported and not blamed, can affect their well-being for years, can support better outcomes within the criminal justice system, and can protect other victims. Yet, even after the first day and the conclusion of the first week, it was brought to my attention by many involved in this case that there are still people in this very community, and elsewhere, I imagine, who are saying that these women were all in it for the money or the attention. Are you kidding me? After 150 heart-wrenching, raw, graphic, visceral impact statements, how can anyone still believe that? Even to this day, even as this historic sentencing hearing is broadcast around the globe, there are still likely people who doubt. Perhaps those 2,000 folks who voted for this defendant as school board member. Perhaps the many petition writers we are aware of who included doctors and trainers and athletes and lawyers who spared nothing to come to the defense of this defendant over 16 months ago and continued to defend him for months, even after he had been charged with Kyle Stevens' abuse. I hope and pray that they're watching, that they're listening, and that they have learned their lesson. The second lesson I take away, and I hope others do, is that anyone can be a perpetrator. Anyone can be a serial sexual abuser. This defendant stole, cheated, and lied. He stole these victims' innocence. He lied about his behavior, and he cheated parents and the community and the world of the trust they held in doctors, prominent physicians, and prominent community members. Experts teach on this issue. Russell Strand, a retired Army criminal investigator, teaches on offender dynamics and behavior. Strand talks about how abusers have 3 personas. The first is the public one for all to see. The second is the uninhabited persona, what you only let others close to you see. And we all have those 2 personas. But the third persona is the hidden and secret one. It's hidden in the mind and the eyes and the beliefs of the perpetrator. And that persona is often hidden well. Serial child molesters hide among us. We know that this defendant had a good persona, a good public persona at least. He was the good guy, the goofy guy, the Olympic doctor, the medical school professor, the gymnastics god. He was a religious and pious man, a father, a husband, a friend, a school board candidate, a man of honor and passion, so kind and giving and always approachable. He never charged for his services, and he saw patients basically anywhere. But we know without a doubt after this 7 days, what we on this team have known for 16 months, that Nassar's third hidden persona, just as Strand discusses, that he is possibly the most prolific serial child sex abuser in history, a selfish child molester who spared No one. Nassar hid behind that outer facade that is different and faked and not real, but that people believed were real. People came to his defense. They believed that they were the man that he wanted them to see and not the monster hiding beneath. As a society, our response cannot be that he couldn't do this, or that I knew his character, I knew he wasn't capable of this kind of crime. It's because no one wants to see it. The only person who sees this side are his victims. Then the perpetrator goes back, shows only what he wants the world to see. This is how he got away with this for so long and got people to believe him over the many, many, many victims who reported. Anyone can be an abuser. The third takeaway from this week is that delayed disclosure of child sexual abuse is not unique. In fact, it's quite the norm. Kids don't report sexual abuse right away, either because the abuser is a trusted adult, especially when it's a doctor, especially when they are so young and have no sexual experience to understand what is wrong. The fourth takeaway is that predators groom their victims and families. This is so confusing to so many women. He was so nice. He gave them presents and trinkets and desserts. He broke rules for them, especially when you contrast his behavior and relationship to the harsh and cruel and abusive coaches that these girls were exposed to. He was only doing that to gain their trust, to confuse them, and get what he wanted. The fourth takeaway is we must teach our girls and boys to speak up. Kids are told to be respectful of adults. Girls and boys don't speak up. It is easier to put up with discomfort than cause waves. And when they are brave, nothing happens. We teach our girls and daughters to be too nice, to just ignore and put up with uncomfortable situations, to stay silent when they should be allowed to be heard. And we need to teach them to continue to speak up until someone listens and helps. The sixth takeaway from this week and a half is that police and prosecutors must take on hard cases, regardless of who the offender is. They cannot shy away from tough cases because of who the offender is or his position in the community. They cannot victim blame or wait until they have the perfect case. They cannot wait until they have dozens of victims who have come forward. Police and prosecutors must also start by believing, be victim-centered and offender-focused in their work. The final takeaway is that we as a society need investigative journalists more than ever. What finally started this reckoning and ended this decades-long cycle of abuse was investigative reporting. Without that first Indianapolis Star story in August of 2016, without the story where Rachel came forward publicly shortly thereafter, he would still be practicing medicine, treating athletes and abusing kids. Let that sink in for a minute. Right now, he would be at his office on Hagedorn and Hanna, not far from this courtroom, in the Michigan State University campus, abusing children, had it not been for the investigative reporters and Rachel who brought this case. We know federal law enforcement did not stop him, nor did trainers or coaches or deans or medical supervisors. Victim disclosures to adults didn't stop him. Reporters began the story, and excellent, victim-centered, offender-focused police and prosecutors grabbed the baton and brought us here today. I am proud of the work of the Michigan State University Police Department and our team at the Attorney General's office. There is no more supportive police chief in this country than Chief Jim Dunlap. And our victims and the public are incredibly lucky to have their case investigated by arguably the best sex crimes detective in the country and her team. Detective Lieutenant Andrea Munford is not only a smart, dedicated, hardworking investigator, but she is also empathetic and compassionate. Our victims are also lucky to have the full and unwavering support of the Michigan Attorney General, Bill Schuette, who from day one of taking on this case has supported this prosecution fully. Our team is so proud of these young women for speaking. So many have shared their story in name and face, and they should feel no shame because they did nothing wrong. He did. It's worth remembering once again that it was one woman who came public first. And when she did, she was ridiculed. Folks rallied behind him. They tried to discredit her. They signed petitions in support of him. They believed him over her because of who he was purported to be. People continued to support him in this very community and believe him after we charged Kyle Stevens' case, after he faced multiple counts of criminal sexual conduct first against a minor. They chose to believe his lies over the words of a young woman who had nothing to gain by coming forward, nothing. Some of his support wavered after he was charged with possessing tens of thousands of images of child pornography. Yet, still, there were people in power who had ideas he was framed and the images were planted, who was telling other victims this as they knew their truth. At the same time that these folks were supporting him and putting out those false narratives, these women and countless more you haven't met and who may be watching and reading knew their truth. They knew he had abused him, and they watched him continue to lie about committing that abuse. It has not been an easy process for these victims, especially Rachel, all alone publicly for many, many months. To be accused of being a Pied Piper of sorts in court and the press, to be accused of somehow planting this idea of victimhood in other women's minds. The gripping testimony these past 2 weeks have shown how absurd those arguments are. You have seen firsthand the effects this abuse has had on these women. That is tangible, physical evidence that this happened, that these women were abused, not bandwagon jumpers, not money grabbers, women and girls who were abused. For victims to realize years and decades later that they were in fact abused, sometimes hundreds of times, when they really thought they were receiving legitimate treatment, it shifts their equilibrium. It shatters their sense of the world, their sense of safety, their conception of trust. It has caused them to question what they believe and know, and that has lasting consequences. Unlike any other crime that comes before you, Judge Aquilina, sexual abuse and assault so deeply affects and alters victims' lives. It seeps and oozes and permeates into every pore and crevice of a victim's life. It can alter their life's trajectory. We've seen that time and time again this week when we've heard of mention of depression and anxiety and panic attacks, suicidal thoughts, self-medication, self-harm, question of self-worth, and even when we heard from Donna Markman some 7 days ago about the suicide of Chelsea. Nassar sentenced these little girls and other little girls to lives in prison by fear and doubt. The courage it takes to overcome so many little obstacles to try and right your world and just live normal daily life again is immeasurable. They had to overcome these obstacles on a daily basis for the rest of their lives. His sexual abuse turned their world upside down and inside out. But this process of support in this courtroom and the community helps bring healing. Your Honor, I wholeheartedly want to thank you and your staff for graciously allowing each victim to be heard. When we fashioned a sentence agreement allowing for the reported victims to speak, which at that point was in the neighborhood of 120 victims, survivors, We wanted all to feel involved in this process and to have their voice heard. What we have witnessed here in this courtroom exceeded even my wildest dream. What we have witnessed here is unprecedented, but hopefully not the last time that victims will be heard in this manner. The compassion and empathy that you have shown these women, the support and encouraging words you have given each one, coupled with what I know is the belief that they and their stories matter, will be remembered by all long after this case is over. Over 150 women had courage to walk into this courtroom, most to be publicly identified and outed to the world as a Nassar victim for the first time, yet they had the grace and the courage to speak their truth and become survivors. To each survivor, thank you. Thank you for coming forward, for trusting us, for doing what is so hard and difficult, especially when you reported to the police, especially to those involved in our charging cases, and especially to those who have had to testify in court. On behalf of the entire Attorney General and Michigan State University Police Department team, we believe you and always have. We thank you. We are proud to stand up for and with you, and you are our heroes. We have seen the worst of humanity and the best in these past few days. The pain and destruction caused by evil, selfish takers like this defendant. But we have also seen how one voice can start a movement, how reckoning can deliver justice, how a community can support and empower and start healing. During these last 7 days on our screen, you have seen countless young, innocent faces. That was on purpose. Every day at this podium that I stand, you saw strong, brave, fierce survivors come here. But that's not who Larry Nassar saw. He was attracted and abused to those young girls in those pictures. But, Your Honor, what you did not see are the sweet, young, innocent faces of girls who have been spared a similar fate because these brave women all spoke up and, more importantly, never gave up. There is no doubt he would have continued to abuse unabated for the rest of his life. I tell these survivors to be proud of what you have accomplished because you are survivors. You have referenced the army of survivors that this proceeding and his abuse has created. This past weekend at women's marches around the country, signs with Kyle Stevens, quote, someone that the world did not even know was affiliated with this case some 5 days before. Those quotes were raised on signs. Little girls don't stay little forever. They turn into strong women who have come back to destroy your world. You heard from Jennifer Rood Bedford, and she concluded by saying, stand for truth, resolve for change, be committed. At this particular moment in history, this sentencing hearing will be viewed as a turning point in how our community, our state, our nation, our culture looks at sexual abuse. This courtroom in the Ingham County Circuit Court was where the shame that many survivors felt was exorcised from them and put where it belongs, right on him. When each survivor came forward and shared their name, told their truth, supported each other, that shift grew. The world has witnessed what happens when victims are treated with respect, dignity, empathy, compassion, and are truly supported by police, prosecutors, and the criminal justice system and courts. What is obvious is that a strong group of determined women can in fact change the world and will. The fact that the women led the investigation, the prosecution team, and that 3 female judges now sentenced defendant Nassar is poetic justice. As I reflect on the last 7 days of the sentencing hearing, it became clear that each day more women and girls were empowered. It was evidenced by our growing number, people that were reaching out to us to come to speak their truth. These women and girls have transformed themselves before our very eyes. From victim to survivor to champion for justice and advocates for change. And all of this on the world outside will carry on. But I want to recenter you and this court and all involved back on the reason we're here. The sentencing of defendant Larry Nassar for his admitted conduct against numerous young girls. He sexually assaulted them. He did so under the guise of medical treatment, and he did so for his own sexual purpose and gratification. He carried out his plot through a decades-long process he honed and perfected, creating perfect conditions for his predatory behavior. Until these brave women brought it all down. Sentencing, Your Honor, must protect, punish, and deter. Through your sentence, I ask you to do all three. Judge Aquilina, I ask you to bring these victims the justice they so deserve. We ask you to follow the sentence agreement and sentence the defendant to a minimum of 40 years to at least 125 years in prison, or a sentence tail that you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your words. On behalf of defendant,
Your Honor, I prepared some remarks today. My client prepared some remarks that he's going to be reading to the court. But I want to start off on some remarks that I have not prepared. This court has provided a foundation for our country to watch our judicial system as it's happening and unfolding. We have a Constitution in place. We learn about the Constitution when we go to law school. Contrary to what the personal or the perception of Larry's legal team may be, we are all upholding the same document. He has an absolute right to his zealous advocacy. He's got an absolute right to a defense. He has an absolute right to be represented by counsel. And while some may disagree to the way that this case transpired, the conduct of counsel, this is what our Constitution permits. And I can tell you and anybody else listening that unequivocally I would be standing next to this man for every trial that he would hold, every sentencing that he would have, because that's what our Constitution requires. This is not about us. This is not about Larry. This is not about his legal team. This is about the victims that were before the court for the last 7 days. But I will tell you, the anger and hatred that they expounded on the court is something that Larry saw, we all saw, and we all heard. As we sat in the court this morning, we received an email from somebody who was anonymous that wished death upon our kids for standing next to the man and upholding a Constitution, a document and an oath that we took when we all went to law school, whether you're a judge, a defense lawyer, or work for the government. We are doing our jobs. You are doing your job, and the government is doing their job. I would stand by the counsel that we have representing Dr. Nassar, and I would represent Larry again. Now, people ask us all the time if Larry's sorry for what he has done, and others ask what Larry is like, while some comment on how he's changed. I'll tell you that Larry is sorry for what he's done, but we realize that these words are completely inconsequential to those that are listening and fall woefully short of an adequate apology to fully address what has transpired. As adults, we understand there are consequences for our actions. Larry's actions have led to an unquantifiable amount of pain. As adults, we should be the only ones who feel pain for our own actions. Sadly, one of the many tragedies in this case is the pain that was articulated these past 7 days is not residing with Larry, but instead, and more significantly, it is felt by the 100+ women who have addressed him in court. He is sorry for the hurt that he has caused, and he is sorry to each and every one of the individuals who have come before your honor. But an apology is not going to be enough. Sometimes individuals can take solace that a small portion of the pain that someone has inflicted on others can be seen in their own appearance and personality. Although it pales in comparison to what we heard these past few days, Larry's soul is broken. He is the shell of a person that we all first met. He is reserved and soft-spoken. His tears are more frequent, and our conversations are more somber. As you all know, we sat with Larry these last few days and saw what he saw. He saw the pain, hurt, and anger on your faces. Your words will stay with him and leave an indelible mark on his soul for the remainder of his life. He realizes that what he is feeling is nothing compared to the pain and hurt all of his victims are feeling and were discussed in this courtroom today. I can assure you that your words have pierced his soul and softened his voice. That will never change. I know Larry wants to address the court as well.
Sir, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to provide will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth on the penalty of perjury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. You need to come up right up to the podium, right to the microphone. What would you like me to know?
It's just a short statement. Your words these past several days, your words, have had a significant emotional effect on myself and has shaken me to my core. I also recognize that what I am feeling pales in comparison to the pain, trauma, and emotional destruction that all of you are feeling. Comparison to the pain, trauma, and emotional destruction that all of you are feeling. There are no words that can describe the
Sir, you need to stay at the microphone or they can't hear you.
An acceptable apology to all of you is impossible to write and convey. I will carry your words with me for the rest of my days.
Sir, I hope that's true. I hope you are shaken to your core. Your victims are clearly shaken to their core. And I know there are still some who ask, are you broken because you got caught? First, let me address counsel. I agree with your words in regard to no one should blame defense counsel, and vigilante crime is not tolerated. So I hope that no one will do anything untoward against counsel, their children, their families, their firms, their cars, whatever it is. That is crime. Crime plus crime solves absolutely nothing. Please respect their job. It's a difficult one. I know I've been. Please respect their job. It's a difficult one. I know I've been in their shoes. And the Sixth Amendment does guarantee each defendant the right to counsel. Doesn't matter what the defendant has done, but they have the right to counsel. I also want to say, that being said, we also have the First Amendment. So you are all free to have your own opinions. And it's always a balancing act between the First Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, all of the due process and other amendments to the Constitution. They are all valuable in their own way. And that's why we have an organized and just society, and that's why we are here today, because this defendant has been brought to justice. Do not make it worse, please. Before I get to sentencing, I want to talk about a couple of things. And first, I've said what I need to say to the victims. I have a little bit more to say. You are no longer victims. You are survivors. You're very strong, and I've addressed you individually. Before I say anything further, I don't know if you all know this, and I know that the world is watching. I know this because I'm on the bench every day, and this isn't the only heinous crime that appears in this court. The National Crime Victimization Survey that's done by the Justice Department annually reports that 310 out of every 1,000 assaults are reported to police, which means that 2 out of 3 go unreported. The voices of the survivors have asked everyone, report, keep your voice up. Rachel's voice hopefully will raise these numbers of reports in all of your voices. But that statistic does not include children 12 and under. 1 in 10 children will be sexually abused by their 18th birthday. 1 in 7 girls, 1 in 25 boys by their 18th birthday. That means that in the United States, I'm not talking about any other country, but in the United States, 400,000 babies born in the U.S. will become victims of child sexual abuse. It stops now. Speak out like these survivors. Become part of the Army. I do one case at a time. And I really so very much appreciate all of your thank yous. I've read some of the Twitters and Facebooks and all of what's going on in the media. I'm not special. I'm doing my job. If you come into my courtroom any Wednesday and watch sentencing, I give everybody a voice. I give defendants a voice, their families when they're here. I give victims a voice. I try to treat everybody like family because that's the justice system that I was raised to believe in. I came to this country stateless. I'm naturalized. My father's Maltese, my mother's German, and I was raised on old country values. And my grandmother always told me, and my parents always told me, my grandfather too, that America is the greatest country. I believe that. That's why I served in the military. That's why I've always done community service. I'm not really well liked because I speak out. I don't have many friends because I speak out. If you ask me a question, you better be ready for the answer. I speak out because I want change, because I don't believe in hiding the truth, and I'm not saying I'm always right, but I try. I also don't believe that one size fits all when it comes to sentencing. Another reason I listen. I know that there are some judges for every crime that give the same punishment. I don't think that's justice. I believe in individualized sentencing. I follow the Constitution, and I believe our system works. I also believe these survivors. Now, there's case law about how I can consider what I can consider. And first and foremost, my sentence reflects the 7 in regard to who defendant pled to. But the remainder of you, the 161 others, add to the credibility of those 7. So technically, I'm considering everything, everyone, because your crime, all of your crimes, the depth of them have cut into the core of this community and many communities and all of the families and people we don't even know. And sir, the media has asked me to release your letter. I'm not going to do that. Council may object, the media may object, but there is some information in here that troubles me in regard to the victims. And I don't want them re-victimized by the words that you have in here. But I do want to read some more of your letter. And the reason I want to do that is because I've considered it in sentencing as an extension of your apology and whether I believe it or not. So I want you to hear your words. I've already read some, and I'm not reading every line. Well, let me begin. The federal judge went ballistic at sentencing since I pled guilty to the state cases and spent 10% on the federal case and 90% on the state cases and civil suits. She gave me 60 years instead of 5 to 20 years, in parentheses, 3 consecutive 20-year sentences. I pleaded guilty to possession of porn from 9/2004 to 12/2004, 4 months. The prosecutor even admitted that I never belonged to any porn sites, any chat rooms, was not on the dark web, and also they could not prove I viewed it. It was all deleted, of course. I shared my electronics, and I could not prove that. So for 4 months of porn possession from 2004, I was sentenced to 60 years. Not proper, appropriate, fair. Going down a few lines. What I did in the state cases was medical, not sexual. But because of the porn, I lost all support, thus another reason for the state guilty plea. Let me move down further. So I tried to avoid a trial to save the stress to this community, my family, the victims. Yet look what is happening. It is wrong. Let me move down further. I was a good doctor because my treatments worked, and those patients that are now speaking out were the same ones that praised and came back over and over and referred family and friends to see me. The media convinced them that everything I did was wrong and bad. They feel I broke their trust. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. It is just a complete nightmare. The stories that are being fabricated to sensationalize this. Then the AG would only accept my plea if I said what I did was not medical and was for my own pleasure. They forced me to say that, or they were going to trial and not accepting the plea I wanted to plead no contest, but the AG refused that. I was so manipulated by the AG and now Aquilina, and all I wanted was to minimize stress to everyone, like I wrote earlier. Going down a little bit further. In addition, with the federal case, my medical treatments with the Olympic/national team gymnastics were discussed as part of the plea. The FBI investigated them in 2015 and found nothing substantial because it was medical. Now they are seeking the media attention and financial reward. Would you like to withdraw your plea?
No, Your Honor.
Because you are guilty, aren't you? Are you guilty, sir?
I said my plea, exactly.
The new sign language has become treatment. These quotes, these air quotes, I will never see them again without thinking of you and your despicable acts. I don't care how they're used, I will always think of quotes and the word treatment. It was not treatment, what you did. It was not medical. There is no medical evidence that was ever brought. When this case first came to me, and I've told you this, and I apologize to the Olympians and athletes, but I have 5 children, 2 dogs. My parents live with me. I work 4 jobs. I don't have much time for television. I don't watch sports. Although last year I was a soccer coach, much to the laughter of my family. I didn't know anything about you, or your name, or anything that was going on. And so when I kept saying, we're going to trial, here's the date, and everyone wanted more time, I said, no, here's the cutoff. And then the cases were merged, and we delayed it. And I still thought, well, maybe there's a defense of medical treatment. And why did I think that? Because it's my job to be fair and impartial, but also because my 2 brothers and my father are very well known and respected doctors. Real doctors with real treatments and research, dedicated to healing. I haven't considered that in this case, but I have heard from your survivors now that they trust doctors like I trust the doctors in my family and the doctors I go to. But I still thought, well, there's a defense of medical treatment, and there are changes in the medical community every day for the betterment. So up until the time you pled, I believed that maybe there was a defense here, despite the felony information. I was ready for trial. Your counsel was ready for trial. The Attorney General's office was ready for trial. You, sir, decided to plead because there was no medical treatment. You did this for your pleasure and your control. This letter, which comes 2 months after your plea, tells me that you have not yet owned what you did, that you still think that somehow you are right, that you are a doctor, that you're entitled, that you don't have to listen, and that you did treatment. I wouldn't send my dogs to you, sir. There's no treatment here. You finally told the truth. Inaction is an action. Silence is indifference. Justice requires action and a voice, and that is what has happened here in this court. 168 buckets of water were placed on your so-called match that got out of control. I also, like law enforcement, or like the Attorney General, want to thank law enforcement for their investigation, but I also want to be the voice on behalf of the survivors who asks law enforcement to continue their fine work and to also include the federal government. There has to be a massive investigation as to why there was inaction, why there was silence. Justice requires more than what I can do on this bench. I want to also applaud all of the counsel in the Attorney General's office. I want to also applaud defense counsel. You all have done fine work. You've made me proud of our legal system. We all work together for the betterment of our community, and that is law enforcement, prosecutors, defense counsel, investigators. There are countless people. It's the only way our system works. We need this balance. So all of you, when I look at myself as Lady Justice, my arms are like this. They are balanced. Prosecution, defense, they're balanced. It only starts to tip after there's a plea and after I take into consideration everything that's happened. So I want everyone to understand I've also done my homework. I always do. People versus Wakalowski. I'm sure I slaughtered the name. I apologize, but it is spelled Waclawski. 286 Mishaf 634. It's a 2009 case. And in it, and I want you to clearly understand, it says, plainly, the law does not limit victims' impact statements to direct victims. It doesn't say, and I have found nowhere that limits me from having you hear all of your victims. As I said before, when counsel came to me and said, we're not going to go to trial, despite our court having already sent out 200 of the 800 juror requests. And they told me their plea, and would I consider it in lieu of trial? There was the agreement between us because I always, and they know it, they are familiar with me, let people speak. And I wanted all victims. And we had a discussion about which victims. And of course, there was an objection to one of them, but I let it come in anyway. That was part of the plea that you entered into, to allow the victim impact statements. Because after that discussion, I know your lawyers, as good as they are, sat down with you and said, the judge is going to allow this. And when it comes down to it, I know it also because this was signed by the Attorney General, by defendant, and by defendant's counsel on November 22nd, 2017. Aside from the letter that you wrote a couple of months after your plea, which tells me you still don't get it, there's something I don't understand and I want to make clear. Sir, you knew you had a problem. That is clear to me. You knew you had a problem from a very young age, even before you were a doctor. You could have taken yourself away from temptation, and you did not. But worse yet, there isn't a survivor who hasn't come in here and said how world-renowned you were. I trust what they say. You could have gone anywhere in the world to be treated. You could have gone to any resort, any doctor, place where you could get treatment. In Europe, they have all sorts of hidden places for things like this. No one had to know, and you could have found some treatment, some help, taken some medicine. You would have done that if you had cancer. I know you would have. You're about self-preservation. But you decided to not address what's inside you that causes this control urge, that causes you to be a sexual predator. So your urges escalated, and based on the numbers that we all know go unreported, I can't even guess how many vulnerable children and families you actually assaulted. Your decision to assault was precise, calculated, manipulative, devious, despicable. I don't have to add words because your survivors have said all of that. I don't want to repeat it. You can't give them back their innocence, their youth. You can't give a father back his life, or one of your victims her life when she took it. You can't return the daughter to the mother, the father to the daughter. You played on everyone's vulnerability. I'm not vulnerable. Not to you, not to other criminals at that podium. I swore to uphold the Constitution and the law, and I am well trained. I know exactly what to do. And at this time, I'm going to do it. And I want you to know, as much as it was my honor and privilege to hear the sister survivors, it is my honor and privilege to sentence you. Because, sir, you do not deserve to walk outside of a prison ever again. You have done nothing to control those urges, and anywhere you walk, destruction will occur to those most vulnerable. Now, I am honoring the agreement. I'm also honoring what's been requested of me. And I want you to know I'm not good at math. I have a cheat sheet. I'm only a lawyer. I know that you have a lot of education in physics and math, but I have a cheat sheet. It is my privilege on counts 1, 2, 5, 8, 10, and 18. And 24. to sentence you to 40 years. And when I look at my cheat sheet, 40 years, just so you know and you can count it off your calendar, is 480 months. The tail end, because I need to send a message to the parole board in the event somehow God is gracious, and I know He is, and you survive the 60 years in federal court first, and then you start on my 40 years, you've gone off the page here as to what I'm doing. My page only goes to 100 years. Sir, I'm giving you 175 years, which is 2,100 months. I just signed your death warrant. I need everyone to be quiet. I still have contempt powers. I told you I'm not nice. I find that you don't get it, that you're a danger. You remain a danger. I'm a judge who believes in life and rehabilitation when rehabilitation is possible. I have many defendants come back here and show me the great things they've done in their lives after probation, after parole. I don't find that's possible with you. So you will receive jail credit on counts 1, 2, 5, 8, 10, and 18 of 369 days. On count 24, you will have 370 days jail credit. If you are ever out, which is doubtful, you would be required to register with the Michigan Sex Offenders Registration Act, complying with all of the requirements of that act, in addition to global position monitoring system. You would wear a GPS. You will pay restitution in the amount to be determined based on whatever amounts are submitted, and your attorneys can ask me for a restitution hearing so that I can determine what a reasonable amount is for the victims. I am leaving restitution open as long as those victims have issues that can be medically documented. You will comply with DNA testing and pay a $60 fee for that. I suspect that was already done, but you owe $60 back to the county for that, or law enforcement, whoever will put it in the right pocket. You must submit to HIV testing and complete counseling associated with HIV and AIDS. You must waive confidentiality and allow test results and medical information obtained from this test to be released to the court. You will pay $476 in state costs. You will pay a crime victims assessment in the amount of $130. Does counsel wish to address court costs and fines? I don't know his financial state.
Judge, he doesn't have any money to pay in court costs and fines. If the court wants to impose it, the court can impose it.
I'm not imposing any court costs and fines, and here's the reason. I don't know what he has or what he'll get in the future. The victims deserve the money. The county will survive one way or another. I'm also going to make recommendations to the Michigan Department of Corrections for mental health treatment. I understand he has some medical conditions and he should be allowed to take medicine for that. He should have individual and group counseling, treatment for sexual predators, whatever they allow. I'm also going to send a message. I'm not sure, but I believe I read an article, sir, that you were treating people in prison that don't have a license, don't commit any more crimes. I know you don't have any more lives to give, but you can't be treating people. You're not a doctor. So I'm not sure how that's happening. But I wanted to send that message. You have 21 days to appeal, 10 days to request court-appointed counsel. Do you acknowledge receipt of your appellate rights?
Your Honor, I've got the notice of right to appeal, and I'm providing it to my client now.
Do you acknowledge it?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Well, let me just say to the media, again, I'm just doing my job. I know you all want to talk to me. My secretary has informed me that I have a growing stack of requests from print media, from television, from magazines, from around the world, literally. This story is not about me. It never was about me. I hope I've opened some doors, but you see, I'm a little stupid because I thought everybody did what I did. And if they didn't, maybe they ought to, but I do this and have been doing it. And if you don't believe me, the keeper of my words is right by my side, and lawyers who are hearing this are shaking their heads saying, yep, I've waited too long, as she lets everybody talk. Sometimes people get upset. I don't care, I get paid the same. So as to the media who want to talk with me, I'm not going to be making any statements. I know that my office, and I may have even, I don't know, been along a couple of weeks, conveyed that after this is over, it's just not my story. After the appellate period runs, with victims by my side to tell their stories, I might answer some more questions than what I said on the record. I don't know what more I could possibly say. But I'm not going to talk with any media person until after the appeal period, and even then, if you talk to me about this case, I will have a survivor with me because it is their story. So I wanted everybody to hear that from me. I respect all of the media outlets. You've done just a fabulous job here. There hasn't been any commotion or upset by this, and I do believe in the First Amendment, so I thank you all for being here because it's an important story for the survivors. As to today, I know that there are a lot of survivors, family members, husbands, friends, a lot of people in the courtroom. You have voices. I'm going to leave the courtroom. Defendant will leave the courtroom. The attorneys may stay. Victims, family members, survivors, you may stay in the courtroom and talk with media. You can have your own press conference right here. Spur of the moment sometimes works out the best, doesn't it? Again, I won't make a statement until after the appeal period. And again, if there's any survivor then who, at that point, if somebody wants to talk to me, I'm sure you'll be moved on to another story, but if you're not, please give your names to the victim's advocate so that I can contact you, because please, media, do not contact me on this story without a survivor. It's their story. I thank everybody in this case. Sir, I hope somewhere you have heard everybody's words, and it really does resonate with you. Anything else for the record?
Nothing on behalf of the people, I'm sorry.
Nothing but half. Mr. Lester.
All right. So the media is asked to stay here with all those lovely people who may want to speak with you. Thank you. That's all for the record.
All right.
Sorry, I keep stepping on your toes here. When you first started this process back in August of 2016, did you ever think that you would get to this point, and did you think it would turn into what it did?
You know, again, the number of sexual assault victims Larry had was plain to me. Whether or not anyone would feel safe enough to come forward, that was the wild card.
Was there ever a moment where you had to step back and say, oh my gosh, there really are this many victims, or did you kind of know deep down?
I knew. Because that's how pedophiles operate. That's how pedophiles operate, and that is why I was convinced, even at 15, that there was no way someone hadn't spoken up. There was no way.
175 years, the right sentence?
Absolutely. I am very grateful for Judge Aquilina and the leadership she's shown for all of us.
Do you think that justice was in this court?
We're going to move on and talk to many of the other victims that are here inside of this courtroom. Again, please forgive the live television moments as we try to crawl around and see what's happening here. Walking through other reporters, walking through all of the media here. Hi, live on TV, sorry. I'm signaling over to talk to Lisa Lorenz, who is the mother of Kaylee, who is the young girl, the tiniest one in the whole courtroom over there on crutches. Lisa, I'm going to kind of reach across the table. We're live on Channel 4 right now. Your daughter is over there. She gave the second statement today. How proud of her are you after all this?
You know, it's indescribable. She just is so grown up and so poised, and it was so heartfelt. And it's like my brain went back to when she used to compete, and you'd be like, oh, that was really good, and I was really proud. And other things, like when she got her scholarship, those are nothing compared to how proud I am of her. She's way stronger than I am.
Kaylee's right there. Come on over, Kaylee. I know we're live on Channel 4 right now. Get your crutches through there. I know it's kind of a silly question, but how do you feel?
Oh my God, I'm so thankful for Judge Aquilina and all the work that she's put into it and the team who's put into it. I'm kind of at a loss for words right now. I've been crying all day, but I'm so happy.
You were one of the final three victims to give your statements today. You told me on numerous occasions that you kept rewriting this over and over again. How many times did you write your final statement?
20. Give or take a few.
I had to take the computer away from her.
She banned me from touching my statement anymore, so.
What was the biggest portion of that you wanted to get across? Was it what you had gone through? Was it something you wanted Nassar to hear?
The ending. I want answers, and I want accountability, and these people need to step up.
What's next for you?
To fight for the answers, I think. I won't stop until I get the answers I want, so.
And I know your mom won't let you.
She won't stop either, so.
175 years, the right sentence?
Unbelievable.
Yes. Yeah, it's the right sentence.
Did you ever think you would get to this point when you stepped forward so many months ago?
No. I mean, you go through it and it feels like such a long time, and this day comes and you can't believe kind of how fast it went and how much you went through in 18 months of this process.
I'm going to let you guys go. You've got a lot of emotions to process right now. Standing next to us is the police chief from Michigan State. Chief, we're live on Channel 4 right now. I know that we're going to separate the Michigan State from the police department right now, for these purposes anyway. What are your thoughts on seeing your team come together and prosecute Nassar?
I'm a little bit of a loss for words. I mean, I'm so proud of all of the work the Special Victims Unit put in. I'm proud of the fact that we were able to have a unit like this to address this, and the Attorney General, the support that they started right from the beginning, getting into this with no reservation, and to get to today is all about all of the girls, and I think what the judge said in the end about this being their day is really exactly what it is. It's their day, and I think she did an absolutely incredible job for speaking for every one of them today.
Did either you or Detective Mumford realize that there would be this many victims?
I don't think anybody had a clue as to the numbers that would end up, coming forward to report, and it's been an enormous drain on the resources, but that drain was worth every hour that was put in, and I don't think that it in any way works out to be what the girls have put in. So every hour that went into that was returned by all of the work that they did coming forward and all the strength. So yeah, I think today is, despite everything, today is a day that everybody can believe that the criminal justice system worked together, and hopefully that will have or result in more people coming forward, and that's the important message.
Absolutely. Chief, thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the prosecution of this. We're going to join now Kyle Stevens. She was the first victim who gave her impact statement 7 days ago. She's talked to a couple of reporters. We're going to kind of join. Actually, she's done. I'm going to join in. Hi, Kyle. I'm so sorry to bother you. We're live on Channel 4, which is NBC Detroit. You heard a lot about what the prosecution, the judge, your remarks early on in this. You kind of set the tone. How do you feel now?
Relieved.
You had said that little girls grow up to come back and destroy your world. Do you think you accomplished that?
Yeah, he's going away for a really long time. He's not practicing medicine anymore. He's not fooling anyone anymore. I think all these little girls grew up to strong women that really rocked his world.
Kyle, thank you very much. Great job. Okay, we're going to continue moving around here. That's Kaylee talking over there. Again, I'm sorry, this is awkward television, but welcome to our world. The prosecutor, Angela Provolitis, is over there. I'm going to try to get some comments from her as we squeeze past some of these reporters and our competition.
Brought us here today, that brought us to this historic sentencing, to this we initially had 4 days lined up and we had 7, and we continue to have reports coming into the police department, and we would encourage anyone else who is affected by Nassar or any sexual abuser to report their abuse to the police. So absolutely, I think this had a huge effect on our survivors and their healing, and I hope the community.
And again, what was the final sentence? It was hard to hear out there.
Her final sentence today was 40 years on a minimum to 175 years on the maximum. Judge Neff in the federal court has also ruled that he is serving 3 consecutive sentences, and that will be.
All right, so that last person you were hearing was Angela Provolitis. She was the prosecutor in charge of this case. We're going to work on so much of this, so much more reaction from all of these victims, the prosecutors, again, the victims turned survivors, on later editions of Local 4 News at 5 o'clock and 6. But for now, we'll toss it back to you, Sandra, in the studio.
that we would bring her here and that she would have a chance to confront him like she did today.
And did you think he's going to appeal?
I see why he wouldn't. I mean, quite frankly, what does he have to lose, right? But I'm not concerned with the appeal at all, and I'd ask our survivors not to waste 1 minute with that concern.
I know you said what you took away from this, multiple things you took away from it. How did this compare to what you had expected to now? How does that...
With this case or in general?
With this case.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, I think what we've witnessed these last 7 days is we started with 88 survivors who wanted to speak. Most of them did not want to be publicly identified, and as each day that number grew and more wanted to be publicly identified, I absolutely believe that they took that shame and they put it on him, and they no longer could, had to carry that around because they did nothing wrong. But I've been a sex crimes prosecutor, a child abuse prosecutor for almost 20 years, and what I witnessed here today, I hope will empower other children, other abusers, other abuse victims to come forward and know that the criminal justice system can support you.
Angela, you may have answered this already, and forgive me for jumping in, but how does this feel?
It's bittersweet. I mean, I think we have absolutely made our community safer by what happened here today and by what these victims have done. It is challenging and difficult, as you all that have been here know, to listen to these grueling narratives of what these women have experienced and done so for many years. So I don't take joy in the fact that we have had to witness and what it has taken, to get us to this point. But I am happy that our victims have been vindicated, they've been believed, they've been supported, that we have a conviction in this case, because not every case turns out that way.
When you started this way, did you have any concerns that this might not come to fruition?
That the case wouldn't, or that he wouldn't be convicted? There are so many variables in the criminal justice system that you can't predict. But I can tell you, as each victim who came to the police reported the same crime, no connections to each other, no motive, no gain, nothing by becoming involved in this and bearing their soul. I thought there was a very good chance we would get him convicted, and I was going to do everything in my power to see that happen.
Angie, what do you think the story says to the world? There have been a lot of things that have been said, a big narrative that has been written over these last 7 days. What do you think the story says to the world?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and I pointed them out in my statements because I really wanted an opportunity to not only talk about Nassar, but to talk about some of the bigger picture issues we have, about victim blaming, victim shaming, about why kids don't disclose, about why people trust protected, prominent people in our community. I think what we need to understand, and I know that there was one survivor who talked about this, but that abusers aren't the people that are hiding in bushes. It's not the monster under your bed. It's often your priest, your coach, your doctor, the people you trust. And as parents, you have to be, I think, take a critical eye and look to that and make sure that the interactions are appropriate, that the communications on social media are appropriate. If your children disclose to you, you need to believe them. You need to report it to police. And you need to keep doing that until someone does something about it.
How do you orchestrate prosecuting this?
That's more than like a 2 minutes.
Okay.
But you haven't.
Sorry. I know you do 5 folks.
Yep.
That's my way. I have like,
No, it's going to be a whole group of all
it's like 25 or something like that.
Yeah, no, it's going to be like myself, and I know there's the voices involved.
Okay. Good.
So.
Can I ask you a couple questions? You up for it? Okay. This is Alex, nicest guy in the world. Most of us anyway. So, Jennifer, how does this feel?
The letter is upsetting. It just proved what we knew when he pled guilty, that he doesn't think that he's guilty. And the fact that he said that he was going to, he was manipulated into doing this. That's exactly what Madeline said in her statement. You use manipulations as what you called the treatment, as the judge likes to say. So, he won't be in the population anymore. He'll be in prison, but he doesn't think that he's guilty. And that's just an abomination.
How's Madeline feeling?
It's been a difficult week listening to all the other stories. We hadn't talked to any other victims. We were trying to keep her private, and then there was a gag order. And so to hear all these similar stories of what happened, the after effects of sexual abuse, it's just really hard And so it's sort of like, it's been a tough week, and hopefully you can start regrouping next week.
That's it. Thank you. It was great to meet you. I'm sorry about these circumstances. You should know your daughter is a rock star. But you already know, I'm sure. What do you need? Yeah, she's right there.